Hi students, welcome to HSC Earth and Environmental Science and Module 8, Resource Management. This is video number 8 and the last in the first section of our resource management module. We're going to be looking at a bit of a case study here, and the case study fits into the general heading of Australian resources. So your task is to prepare a case study of an important Australian renewable or non-renewable resource, including but not limited to how the resource is found, extracted or managed, how the resource is used, whether the resource can be extracted and or used sustainably, and the past, present and future use and importance of the resource. So this is a lot of stuff to cover, and it is really important that you work through one of these yourself as an example, but I'll give you a quick overview and I'm going to focus on gold. So gold has a lot of very important implications, very ancient history, but also one that continues in level of importance through to today. Gold is a non-renewable resource and therefore it is a finite resource, but we're going to have a look at gold. So when you're planning a case study, the important thing is to extract each of the key components of that case study so that you know you've covered each of the points. So I've basically taken those sections out of that learning outcome from the syllabus and used them as headers for each of these separate slides. So this is what I would encourage you to do, whether you're looking at gold, aluminium is another very good one, and obviously we're encouraging some sort of focus on renewables as well, so you don't have to pick one of these ones. It's just you'll find a lot of information on things like gold, coal, as well as many of the metals, zinc, lead, aluminium, copper. But this one doesn't specify. So I think the important thing is just to make sure that you can find something where there's plenty of information and you can answer each of these key questions. So the first thing that we need to look at for our case study is how is it found, extracted and managed. So gold is basically found in two forms. The first form are what we call primary gold deposits. So that's the actual formation of the gold in the rocks. Now often gold is found in association with quartz, and therefore extracting those, and usually they are veins, small amounts of gold, and of course as with any ore, the amount that there is and in comparison to the cost of getting it out and purifying it affects whether or not the ore is going to be an economic one. The advantage, two significant advantages with gold is firstly it's unreactive, or it's very low reactivity, which means it's often found in its native form, so you don't have to put a lot of energy into purifying it. The other thing is it is such a valuable resource as well, so the costs associated with purchasing gold are very high, which means that there's a high economic benefit, and that is going to confer an economic status to a lot of areas where we're looking for gold, where even there may be smaller amounts. Extracting gold from rock is kind of the same sort of process that we've talked about previously. If there's gold veins, we've got to mine, we've got to crush that rock down, and we've got to kind of process them. There's a little bit of processing associated with basically isolating the gold so that it's in a form that we can therefore use. But in addition to primary gold deposits, we can also find gold in secondary deposits. And one of the other properties of gold is that it has a high density. And this high density comes into effect when it actually is eroded from its parent rock. So wherever the primary gold deposits are, if they come to the surface and the surrounding rock starts to erode or at least weather away, and those gold deposits are then carried through the processes of erosion away from the original source, maybe through rainfall into a stream. The high density of gold means that it will drop, and often it'll drop into little hollows or traps within the riverbed, and it'll concentrate in those sorts of areas. And then it can be panned, and you may well have had an experience of panning for gold, alluvial gold. Which is basically the stuff that we find separated out and moving through these different river systems. So that's a secondary gold deposit, and contrast, or at least is sourced from primary gold deposits. So how is gold used? Well, I probably don't need to answer this question in a lot of detail, but when you're talking about how your particular resource is used, try and link properties with usage. So obviously some important properties of gold is that it's very rare. I've talked about its high density, low activity, so it doesn't rust, it's not toxic, it's easy to work and shape, it's malleable, which means we can beat it and shape it. It's ductile, which means we can draw it out into thin wires. It's highly conductive, and it has a beautiful appearance. It looks wonderful. That's one of the things that we love about gold. It just looks great. Gold is such an important commodity that it is traded almost daily on stock exchanges, not just the commodity itself, but also companies that are associated with the mining for gold, and perhaps even some of the companies that provide materials to the companies that mine the gold. All of these are getting a nice slice out of this very lucrative gold market. But like any commodity, the price of gold fluctuates on a day-by-day basis, and often gold is the alternative to cash. So cash has obviously a certain value. It's a face value that rises and falls on the basis of economic activity. And gold it also fluctuates, but it's a solid thing that you can kind of buy and purchase, or you can buy scripts in it. In addition to its important value as a commodity, as a sort of financial safeguard, it also has a very important role to play in jewelry, metals and decoration, in electronics. I'm sure you're carrying around some gold in your mobile phones. And also in some medicine and dentistry. So gold has very broad applications in terms of its usage, and those uses are linked to its properties. What about extraction and sustainability? So that's our next test for gold. Can we extract it sustainably? Well, look, there's the biggest gold nugget that's ever been found is this replica that's being held. It was called the Welcome Stranger, 72 kilos. If you can imagine 72 kilos, that's a person, a weight of gold. That would have been worth an absolute fortune. But these sorts of nuggets are incredibly rare. Most gold these days is found as little flecks, often found perhaps occasionally in veins, but very often as alluvial gold that's been panned out of a river. There are, like any mining activity, if we do find a vein, so if we're talking about a primary gold deposit, then we do want a vein. We do therefore need to make the decisions about how we're going to extract that. Are we going to open cut mine it? Are we going to underground mine it? And then the associated rehabilitation plans, which we've talked about in this series, has to come in. Alluvial panning is much more sustainable. So the secondary, what we talked about as secondary gold, which is this alluvial gold that collects, that's eroded away from its source and is deposited in riverbeds. This is less lucrative. It tends to have a lot smaller, finer particles of gold. You need a lot of it in order for it to be economically sustainable, but it is much more environmentally sustainable because of the fact that you're not having to mine and cut down great amounts of the bedrock or the non-economic material in order to get to the economic material. So gold, depending on its form, its price almost always makes it a sustainable resource. But the other thing, of course, is that it's a non-renewable resource, are finite. And so they will run out. The processes of gold formation, which were occurring deeper in the structure of the earth, are not happening to the same extent these days. Our proportion of gold that we have on the earth is probably pretty much already appeared on the surface. So this is a non-renewable resource, and there's only so much that we can continue to extract before this resource runs out. Past, present, and future uses and importance of gold. Well, if you've done any Egyptian studies, you will know that gold has a very long history. Its beauty has basically made it a desired possession of rulers throughout history. And the fact that it remains rare, so one of the important things about this is it's rare, it has high demand, and it's just its great beauty means that it's going to continue to remain a very important resource for the years to come. The fact that it's finite means we're not going to just be able to find this endless supply of gold that continues to drive the prices up. The fact that it's so highly desired and it has such a broad range of uses and it's so stable chemically just gives it that longevity that we could expect to continue, not just as a valuable resource today, but as one that's going to continue to be a valuable resource into the future. Gold is synonymous with great wealth. So these two things tend to go together. Often the ancient rulers' wealth was measured by the amount of gold that they had. And all these incredible properties of gold, its appearance, stunning appearance, its softness, its ductility, its malleability, its conductivity, its low chemical reactivity, and its high density are all very important attributes that make it a commodity that we can expect is going to continue to be important into the years to come. So when you're putting your case study together for this particular section, whether you're looking at gold, and I hope if you are looking at gold, you might expand a little bit on this very brief introduction that I've given you. But even if it's not gold, find something, pull those headings together so that you make sure that you've got something in each of those areas. One of my students several years ago used to answer a lot of his questions with tables, and those tables helped to ensure that he had all of the potential outcomes covered. He just knew that if he had something in each box or each cell, that everything that he needed to cover was covered, and he did very well as a result of that. And it's a great technique, one that you might want to consider using. But that's it for our case study, and also for inquiry question 1. Our next section, we're going to move on to waste management, but we'll do that in future videos. Thanks for watching.